Piers Morgan accused, Traoré responded. But it wasn't an ordinary clash. It was a collision of facts and egos. From electrical vehicles to space programs, every criticism was met with hard evidence. The big question, who really came out on top? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. The discussion began with Piers Morgan adopting his signature confrontational style, setting a tense tone right from the start. He wasted no time in questioning Captain Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, implying that his governance lacked legitimacy. Morgan hammered on the decision to postpone Western-style elections in Burkina Faso, portraying it as proof that Traoré was abandoning democratic ideals. He claimed that by delaying the electoral process, Traoré had effectively placed himself above the will of the people, branding his leadership as authoritarian under the guise of stability. Morgan's delivery made it clear this wasn't merely about one leader or one country. It was an interrogation meant to challenge the credibility of African leadership on the global stage. Morgan didn't stop there. His accusations grew sharper as he pivoted toward Traoré's international alliances. He pointed to Burkina Faso's strengthening ties with non-Western nations, particularly with Russia, as evidence of a deliberate shift away from established Western partnerships. How can you claim to protect democracy, Morgan pressed, while aligning with nations that openly prioritize authoritarianism over individual freedoms? He framed these alliances as reckless, even dangerous, arguing that they signaled a broader betrayal of the global norms the West had long set. To bolster his critique, he leaned on the narrative that Western democracies provide the ultimate blueprint for success, portraying alternative approaches as inherently flawed or unsustainable. Perhaps most striking was how Morgan tied Traoré's policy decisions to economic troubles within Burkina Faso. He cited reports of financial hardship and stagnation, linking them to what he characterized as mismanagement under Traoré's leadership. "Your people are suffering, Captain," Morgan said sharply, pointing to rising concerns about poverty, inflation, and basic infrastructure needs. By coupling economic challenges with accusations of anti-democratic behavior, Morgan depicted Traoré's government as both politically and practically failing to deliver on key promises. His criticisms weren't just meant to unsettle Traoré, but to paint an overarching picture of dysfunction, positioning him as a leader unfit to steer Burkina Faso forward. All the while, Morgan repeatedly emphasized the West's global leadership standards, casting them as the gold standard against which all others must be measured. His approach wasn't subtle. There was a clear undercurrent of superiority in how he framed his arguments. Each line carried the implication that without adherence to the Western model, nations like Burkina Faso were doomed to fail. This wasn't just a critique of one leader, but a direct challenge to what Morgan saw as the growing trend of African leaders rejecting traditional Western influence in favor of alternative paths. Morgan's confidence throughout the exchange was palpable. His tone suggested he was in complete control, certain that his pointed criticisms would leave Traoré with little room to maneuver. The audience, too, seemed to lean into this initial narrative. There was skepticism toward Traoré, particularly given the weight of Morgan's accusations. It was clear that Traoré wasn't just defending himself, he was defending the legitimacy of his vision, his leadership, and Burkina Faso's trajectory in the face of mounting global scrutiny. But what came next defied expectations. Instead of defending himself in the way Morgan likely anticipated, Traoré took a different path. He didn't jump to deny the accusations or respond in anger. Instead, he began to shift the foundation of the conversation entirely. His response wasn't about matching rhetoric with rhetoric, but about taking control and refocusing the lens through which the debate was being framed. This was no longer about defending against accusations. It was about flipping the script. By the end of Morgan's initial barrage, the stage was set for what would become the critical turning point in the discussion. Traoré's calm demeanor and deliberate posture hinted that he had a strategy, a way to dismantle Morgan's arguments brick by brick. The conversation seemed poised to shift, but the real surprise lay in how Traoré would do it, by weaponizing facts and evidence in a way no one, not even Morgan, saw coming. Traoré began his response with an air of quiet determination, a sharp contrast to Morgan's confrontational energy moments earlier. Without raising his voice or resorting to theatrics, he calmly set forth his approach. This wasn't going to be a battle of words or ideology. Instead, Traoré made it clear he was prepared to shift the conversation by introducing one thing Morgan couldn't sidestep: tangible, irrefutable facts. His measured tone and unwavering gaze immediately changed the energy in the room, signaling that he was here to deliver something far more powerful than a defensive argument. Rather than diving into ideological debates, Traoré drew the focus to concrete actions and measurable results. His strategy centered on evidence, a move that not only countered Morgan's narrative, but reframed the entire discussion. You call African truth propaganda because it doesn't flatter your worldview, but our platform, our media, our voice is where the lies of 50 years are finally being replaced with clarity, he said, addressing claims of media manipulation. This statement, paired with data and visuals, set the tone for what followed. A detailed account of real-world progress under his leadership, laid bare for the audience to consider without distraction or spin. He pivoted to countering accusations of economic mismanagement with carefully selected examples of Burkina Faso's strides across key sectors. Footage of agricultural programs was displayed, fields once barren, now lush with crops, aided by irrigation systems newly constructed under government initiatives. Traoré shared statistics about job creation, proudly stating that over 700,000 agricultural jobs had been generated in rural areas. The scenes of local cooperatives thriving and people regaining land long taken from them were hard to dismiss. These images, paired with his narration, painted a striking picture of a country working to reclaim its independence and resilience at the grassroots level. He didn't stop there. Taking on claims about education and progress, Traoré presented visuals of literacy programs active in 300 villages, where children were shown holding new books in their reformed village schools. The undeniable evidence of children learning and communities growing stronger directly challenged the assumptions Morgan had earlier built his accusations upon. Traoré's voice remained steady, his words more focused on the practical results than abstract ideological clashes. "I'm not here to chase applause," he said. "I'm here to free my nation from dependency." That simplicity resonated deeply. Traoré saved perhaps his most clever rebuttal for Morgan's comments on media platforms and their misuse. He revealed data showing that foreign disinformation in Burkina Faso had been reduced by 75% through carefully planned reforms involving grassroots networks, AI tools, and moderation efforts. "We've reduced foreign disinformation by 75% using grassroots networks, AI, and yes, moderation. Because freedom of speech is not freedom to poison," Traoré stated firmly. He described these reforms as a necessary shield to ensure local narratives weren't drowned out by what he called digital colonization. The sheer scale of the accomplishment, combined with the deliberate intent behind it, fundamentally shifted the room's perception of his governance. The audience's reactions reflected this shift. What began as polite, skeptical silence slowly morphed into nods of agreement and murmurs of support. Morgan, on the other hand, struggled to maintain his composure. His discomfort became more apparent with each passing fact, as Traoré refused to rise to his provocations, and instead presented achievement after achievement in response to every charge. While Morgan might have expected evasiveness or defensiveness, what he encountered instead was an unflinching presentation of reality. By the time Traoré had finished, it was clear the room's perspective had shifted. His facts carried weight that rhetorical attacks alone simply couldn't diminish. For many, seeing proof of reform, progress, and tangible benefits was more powerful than any ideological argument. Traoré wasn't just refuting Morgan's claims. He was rewriting the narrative completely. It marked a turning point. The confidence Morgan had initially exuded began to falter, setting the stage for his visible frustration as the debate unfolded further. Morgan's frustration became impossible to ignore. Each time he attempted to counter Traoré's points, it felt like his words only bounced back, landing flat against the weight of cold, hard evidence. His usual arsenal, cutting interruptions and fiery one-liners, had little effect as the debate slipped further out of his control. The audience, once cautiously aligned with Morgan's skepticism, began to warm toward Traoré. Polite murmurs turned into scattered applause, and soon the room felt almost electric with a renewed energy. The shift was happening in real time, and Morgan, who had appeared so confident earlier, seemed to sense it. Trying to reel the conversation back in, Morgan turned to dismiss what he called Traoré's distractions. He zeroed in on two programs in particular: Burkina Faso's electric vehicle (EV) initiative and a space program spearheaded by Traoré's government. With a mocking tone, Morgan labeled these efforts vanity projects, accusing Traoré of wasting resources on fantasy solutions while his citizens faced daily struggles. His voice carried a pointed question: do the people in your fields need satellites to eat or electric motorbikes to survive? It was an attempt to discredit Traoré's leadership by painting his ambitions as impractical and disconnected from reality. Traoré's response, however, turned the narrative once more in his favor. Without hesitation, he detailed the practical impacts of these programs, driving his point home with results that couldn't be ignored. On the space initiative, Traoré outlined how BurkinaSat, the country's satellite program, wasn't about indulgence, but necessity. Satellites, he explained, were helping farmers monitor drought conditions, provide precise data for crop planting, and connect remote rural schools to educational resources. Contracts with the African Union alone had created not only funding opportunities, but also jobs for over 1,500 young engineers. This isn't a luxury, Traoré said flatly. It's survival. Then came the EV program. Traoré dismantled Morgan's dismissal of it as a gimmick by showing how it directly addressed pressing issues in Burkina Faso. Over 10,000 electric motorcycles had already rolled out on the streets, reducing reliance on expensive fuel imports and cutting transport emissions in key areas by 40%. He added, "We've created jobs, reduced dependency on fuel imports, and slashed transport emissions by 40% in our pilot regions." Each word landed harder than Morgan's earlier accusations of waste. This wasn't idealism, it was strategy. As Traoré spoke, the room's mood deepened into something more than support. It was respect. The applause that followed each of Traoré's counterpoints grew louder, turning into clear signs that the audience's trust had shifted. While Morgan tried to poke holes by doubling down on Western leadership models, his arguments seemed less relevant in the face of Traoré's hands-on results. By focusing on projects that visibly improved everyday life in Burkina Faso, Traoré managed to connect with the audience on both a factual and emotional level. He wasn't just proving Morgan wrong, he was demonstrating his own ability to lead with vision and impact. Outside the studio, viewers on social media amplified the momentum Traoré had generated. Memes flooded Twitter, crowning Traoré as the debate's undeniable winner. One captured Morgan's exasperated expression mid-interruption with the caption, "Mocked a revolutionary, got educated, self-destructed." Another meme simply featured Traoré with the words, "Facts greater than rhetoric." Videos of the debate circulated rapidly, tallying millions of views and solidifying the online narrative that this wasn't just a clash of two perspectives, but a definitive victory for evidence over bluster. The debate reached its tipping point when even the host couldn't ignore how dramatically the dynamic had shifted. Acknowledging the energy in the room, they remarked, "This has become a collision of visions, where rhetoric met reality and facts carried more weight than fire." The audience erupted in applause, a final seal of approval for what had just unfolded. Morgan, clearly flustered, could do nothing but sit back, rendered effectively silent in the face of evidence he could no longer contest. What had started as an attempt to expose leadership flaws had instead become an unmistakable demonstration of strength. Traoré's ability to stay composed, deploy facts as his weapon, and inject emotional resonance into his points left no room for rebuttal. For Morgan, there was no way forward. For Traoré, the debate had paved the way for a much larger conversation about leadership, progress, and independence in a world shaped increasingly by truth and data. The debate didn't just shift opinions about one leader, it reframed how African leadership is perceived on the global stage. Traoré's reliance on evidence and practical achievements left an impression that extended beyond the room, challenging entrenched narratives about governance and progress. His calm delivery and visible results showed what leadership rooted in truth could accomplish. Meanwhile, Morgan's sarcasm and unverified claims revealed the limits of rhetoric when facing undeniable facts. This debate reminded everyone watching to question narratives, value proof over assumptions, and recognize that integrity and evidence can turn any challenge into an undeniable victory. Will you?